In the last few years, track days have been getting more and more popular. Taking your sports car or sports sedan to a road course racetrack can be a great way for you to explore its performance potential in a relatively safe and controlled environment while also working on your driving skills. But what are the costs involved? Just how expensive is it to participate in this hobby and routinely track something like my Porsche GT4? We'll find out next on Autopilot. This is definitely one of the more common questions I get from friends and from viewers of the channel. Just how much does it cost to run my GT4 on the track? So for the purposes of this video today, we'll be discussing the costs associated specifically with my GT4 and with the driver such as me at an advanced level. Obviously the cost can be higher or lower depending on the car that you're running and your level of experience in and how much you're actually using the car on the track. For those of you who may not know, track days, also commonly known as High Performance Driver Education or HPDE events, are typically run in the United States by groups or organizers that will rent the track from the facility for the weekend or for the day, and then you as the driver in turn pay a fee to run with that group or organizer for the day or the weekend. These groups can include chapters of local car clubs such as BMW or Porsche or Ferrari or Corvette or what have you, or they could be independently run groups such as Hooked on Driving or Chin Motorsports or various other organizations throughout the country. So that represents the first fixed fee of what you're going to be paying to participate in a track day, which is the entry fee. Typically this runs about $400 per day. It can be less if you've moved up through the ranks and you've gotten to the instructor level, in which case some groups will discount your fee or waive your fee altogether if you're an instructor. But for our purposes, we'll say $400 for the entry fee. The next consideration is track day insurance. Most, if not all, major auto insurance carriers will not cover your car for any kind of physical damage that occurs as the result of an incident on a track or on a racetrack. Even though these track events or track days could be considered driver education, they're certainly non-competitive and it's not a race. Still, the auto insurance companies won't cover your car for track events as part of your normal everyday auto insurance policy. So as a result, it's wise to seek out specific track day insurance policies. There are plenty of companies that offer them. They could be purchased either as individual policies per event or per weekend, or they could be purchased in packages or even for a complete season. If you plan on doing multiple events over a season, it can be more economical that way. As to whether or not they're necessary, some people argue yes or no. I generally recommend that you get them, especially if the car has any kind of value and you're not willing to incur that financial risk of potentially a total loss if you slide off track and hit a barrier at high speed. Incidents on track don't happen that often, but they do happen, and sometimes they're simply out of your control. It's either due to another car or some other thing that you have little control over, unfortunately. So better to be covered and to have that assurance. Most policies set the deductible at 10%, which is the case for the policy that I get for my car. For me, it runs $480 per event, but because I buy it in a package of 3 or 6 events, it ends up being $430 per event. The next item on the list, and it's an obvious one, is gas. Obviously, you burn through a lot of fuel when you're on the track running hard. I have my iPad here for figures. Typically, I'll go through anywhere from a quarter to a third of a tank of gas per session. A session on the track lasts anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, typically around 25 minutes, but depending on the length of the session and the track itself, the layout of the track, you burn more or less gas, but typically a quarter to a third of a tank of gas. The cheap way to handle gas is to try to fill up the tank outside of the confines of the track, somewhere in the neighborhood prior to getting there, where the gas is obviously cheaper. Or you can end up purchasing gas at the pumps at the track. Most tracks have pumps there on site, although the gas tends to be a little bit more expensive. So the ultimate cheap way to do it would be to fill up the tank right before you get to the track and bring additional jugs with you, because you're going to end up going through more than a tank full during the day. But bring a jug or two with you. The downside to that, which I prefer not to do, is I don't want to have multiple jugs filled with gas riding in the passenger seat with me on the highway. I don't think that's the safest thing. So I end up just paying the heavier price of buying gas at the track when I'm running low. At Lime Rock, where I run frequently, it's $6.50 a gallon for 93 octane premium. So on average, I end up going through about 18 gallons of gas. So at the cheapest end of that, if did the first strategy of filling up prior to getting to the track and then bringing gas in jugs, figuring currently we're at about $3.29 a gallon for premium around here, times 18 gallons would be $59. Or if you end up purchasing it at the track, it could be as much as $120 for the day for cost of gas. The next item, and it's a big one, is tires. Obviously, you go through tires pretty quickly when you're on track, as opposed to regular road use where you're looking at thinking that you're getting 10, 15, 20,000 miles out of a set of tires. Instead, on the track, you're looking at merely a number of days that you're getting out of a set of tires. You run through them that quickly. I run Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires on the GT4. They're 19-inch. I downsized from the OEM 20-inch down to 19-inch. To save weight, helps my gearing a little bit as well, and I was able to run the 19-inch Forge Line wheels that way. But currently at Tire Rack, a set of 4 of these 19-inch Michelins is $1,732. Again, I'm getting about 4 to 6 days of meaningful use out of them. Otherwise, they're pretty much shot after that. So $1,732 for the tires, plus figure about $160 for mounting and balancing at an independent shop for the tires. You add those two together and then divide by 4 if you're getting 4 days of use out of them, and that's about $473 a day. Or if you're getting 6 days of use out of them, then that's $315 a day. The next item on the list, another heavy use item, is brake pads. You definitely go through brake pads on the track. In my situation, I ended up changing from the OEM pads to Performance Friction 11, PFC 11 compound pads all around, which are a great pad for the track, a great high temperature pad with good bite. I'm typically getting about 10 track days use out of the front pads and about 15 days out of the rear pads. I end up buying them from Suncoast Porsche Parts in Florida, which is a good discount mail order place for various parts. If I were to change the pads myself, since they're $425 for a front set, divided by about 10 days per front set, that would be about $43 a day there. And for the rear, also $425 for the rear set, divided by 15 days use, that would be about $28 a day. I generally end up taking the car to my independent shop for them to do it, and if you figure that they're charging about $120 an hour of labor, and it takes about a half an hour per axle to do the brake pad change, then you're looking at, for the front, the $425 for the pads, plus $60 worth of labor divided by the 10 days is about $49 a day, and in the rear, the $425 for the pads plus $60 for the half hour of labor divided by 15 days is about $32 a day. When you're consuming brake pads, you're also going to be eventually consuming brake rotors. So that's another big consideration, that when you do this enough and you put enough track time on the car, you're eventually going to have to replace your rotors from wear. I ended up, as soon as I took delivery of the car, I took off the OEM rotors and I upgraded to AP J-hook rotors, which are two-piece rotors, true two-piece rotors that allow you to change just the outer friction ring and save the hat, or the central hat. So it ends up saving money over the long term when you end up changing your rotors due to wear. It's cheaper than just continually replacing OEM rotors. In terms of cost for that, I'm getting about 20 days out of a front set of rotors and about 30 days out of a rear set of rotors. So if I were to do that myself, do the swap myself, I'd be looking at the cost of $1,150 for a set of front rotors, divided by about 20 days use, ends up being about $58 a day. For the rear, it would also be $1,150 divided by the 30 days use I'm getting out of the rears is about $38 a day. However, again, I end up generally having my independent Porsche shop take care of that for me. And again, looking at about $120 an hour worth of labor, they would end up spending about a half an hour per axle again on the rotor change. So it would be $1,150 plus 60 for the labor divided by 20 days is $61 a day for the front. And in the rear, it's the $1,150 plus 60 labor divided by 30 days for the rear ends up being about $40 for the rear rotors. Last part of the picture for brakes is brake fluid. It's important to have good quality brake fluid in the car and to pay attention to it and change that fairly frequently to make sure that there's not moisture in it and that you're maintaining nice solid brakes. About once a season or roughly 10 track days, I'll do a brake fluid flush. If I were to do it myself, that would be about $40 just for the fluid itself, divided by getting 10 days out of that change is only about $4 a day. My shop doing it takes about an hour, so the $40 for the fluid plus $120 in labor divided by the 10 days that I would get out of that brake fluid flush ends up being about $16 a day. And finally, the last item is oil and oil filter. Don't want to overlook that. Typically about every 6 track days, I will have a complete oil change and filter change. Doing it myself would be about $90 worth of materials for that, divided by the 6 days use I'd get out of that would be about $15 a day. Typically, though, I will also have my independent shop take care of that. So about $90 in the materials for the oil and the filter, and about an hour's worth of labor, or $120. Add those two together, divide by 6, ends up being about $35 a day. So when we add up all of these items, including the entry fee, track insurance, which I highly recommend, the cost of fuel, tires, brake pads, brake rotors, brake fluid, oil and filter, add all these things together, average them out per track day, you're looking at a minimum around $1,389 a day if you're doing a lot of the work yourself in terms of the maintenance of changing your rotors, your brake fluid, your oil, doing that all yourself, up to as much as $1,705 a day if you're having a shop take care of all these things for you. Other costs to consider, especially if this ends up being something you do more than once and it becomes a hobby, something that you do multiple times, is safety equipment, which is so important in really investing in yourself. In my particular case, I did the things that I would consider at a minimum to do, which are installing a roll bar both for safety and for allowing the mounting of 6-point harnesses, which I did. And in running the harnesses, you're much more secure in the car, and also it allows you to run a Hans device, which keeps your head and neck stable in the event that you were to have a frontal crash. The one-time costs I had for the roll bar were $2,600 for that. The harnesses were $550 each. There are 2 of them, driver and passenger. The Hans device is about $450. And then investing in a quality helmet, which could be anywhere from $200 to $2,000, depending on how crazy you want to go and whether you want a carbon fiber helmet and all the different features of that. So there you have it, adding everything up, anywhere from $1,400 to $1,700 a day for running track days in the Porsche GT4. Probably even more than I was really thinking before I added everything up. But there are certainly more expensive hobbies out there. It's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's very addicting. It's a great time, and a great group of people generally are out there that you end up making friends with on track. So I highly recommend it. There are cheaper ways to go about it, and certainly people who've been doing this for quite some time end up moving to things like a spec Miata race car or a mid-90s BMW M3 that's been turned into a track car that are they're lighter weight, they're safer and more fun because they're dedicated track cars. They're lighter weight, they're easier on consumables, so they go through tires and brake pads less frequently than a heavier car. Believe it or not, this car at 3,100 pounds, there are plenty of track cars that are much lighter than it. So there are ways to do it cheaper. Also, when people have a Miata or an older BMW, they might forego the cost of track insurance, which saves you $400 an event right there, especially if they have a lot less money invested in the car. So that's it for now. I hope this was informative for you, and I'll see you next time on Autopilot.